Ready? Are we going? Says we're live. Says we're connected. Connected and live. Connected and live. I am trying to make sure I'm actually live. Says I'm connected. Let's see. Boom. Sweet little echo. Got that going. Can I pop out chat? I don't know if I can. This is the one difficulty with Riverside that I am finding is I still have to manage chat separately in separate windows. That's not what I want. That's good. Move this over here. This is fine. You know, this is fine. We are figuring it out. Twitch. Let's see. Twitch going. It says I'm live. Watch now. Huh. It's not even showing the right screen. That's funny. Ah. Okay, well, that's unfortunate. But we will hope most people are tuning in through Riverside. Let me take a note. Twitch did not share video. Whoops. Okay, Riverside. Got some notes for yous. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Let's see, chat. Oh, all right, that was a little weird that it was behind like that. Show me some chat. Can I pop out? Pop out chat. Sweet beans. There we go. Okay, so I know that it's going. How about LinkedIn? Are we going here? Did it update anything? Looks like LinkedIn is still having issues. Okay. Yeah, it looks like it didn't make it to LinkedIn. So that's note number 2. All right. We'll start with a couple of questions that I had prepared just in case. So just for clips. So anybody watching this, you'll find out that you're not missing the whole deal. Question number 1. What is the biggest misconception hidden inside the phrase, the rise of indies? Is that the games industry and the fandoms and communities can't agree on what indie actually means. The big challenger to that recently was Sandfall Entertainment with Expedition 33. First title, small team, less than 100 until you include the contractors that they had and then publishing help, all that kind of stuff. And yet a lot of people considered it an indie title. It was their breakout title. They had industry experience, but then some people were just like, first time in. Where do you draw the line on what indie is and isn't? So it gets a little mucky. So there is no agreement on what indie is. I'll tell you what my description of indie is in a little bit, but just know that you could talk about a variety of people. Someone who's solo, fully self-funding, and released 10, 20 games, and I wouldn't consider them indie anymore because they kind of know who they are creatively. They're pushing their own boundaries, but you kind of know what to expect until they do something drastically different. And in that form, I see them more as an artist and forming expression and going through their phases and their own movements. So it's more artistry than indie, as in like an independent artist with the music labels and everything. But you could get Sandfall, who's 100 people, with some people saying, hey, I think it would be fun to make a game, and not know anything about it, like their composer, who comes in and makes the phenomenal score that is Expedition 33. So you'll get what you get from that. But for the the context of what I'm talking about tonight, I'll kind of share things a little bit more as I get into that conversation. Question number 2. Finish the sentence. More people can make games now, but that does not mean blank. For me, that means it doesn't mean they know how to make a good game, market a good game, sell a good product, or communicate what their game was supposed to accomplish. There's so many bugs in games that come out that then become kind of an identifier of it, or part of the community that just gets behind it. You had some weird bugs in WoW, you've had skiing and tribes and other examples like that that come through that just end up making a wave in the community, and it becomes kind of culture, almost like Jimothy the raccoon is right now. It's one of those things. And so when you go to make a game, I believe everyone's capable of making a game, and that's why you're getting games like that are in that category of friend slop, where it's thrown together, there's going to be bugs, it's going to be chaos, and it's meant for a good time with your friends because you understand the context that you're using it to hang out and just have a raucous time, right? So that's how you can make a good game for that context. Is it going to necessarily sell? No. But then you have games like Mecha Chameleon that just come out of nowhere and hit the vibe. We saw it with Inner Sloth and Among Us during quarantine. That game had already been out for years, and they were already moving on to their next project, and then it blew up. You can't count on when a good game is going to catch its wave, or when a game is going to really hit the need. And so you can do something to put out an idea and an execution, but you're not necessarily going to make the next big hit with purpose and intention. For me, it's about throwing darts at a dartboard. Get that expression and that creativity going until you can land that role. Let's see. Let me make sure other chat's not missing, or I'm not missing other chat. Let's see. There's that chat and YouTube chat. Move you over here. Kind of see my face. Perfect. Okay. Third question. What is the first mistake a small team makes when writing a GDD? I think the GDD format alone is already kind of complex and complicated, and it's got a bunch of hearsay about what needs to go in it, how someone else did it. I mean, you could do a quick search online, and I can provide some examples, but there's like Monaco and Deus Ex and Grim Fandango, and you can see everything from like the 11-page run and gun for Grand Theft Auto 1, and then you can see like a 311 page for, I think it was Deus Ex, or another action shooter game where it's like they detailed everything. And when I say everything, it was everything. But like GTA wasn't even called GTA in its GDD, it was called Run and Gun. So whatever you think needs to go in there, I think needs to be more of that reflection of your team culture, your team pillars, as well as your project pillars, and then going into your vision. Because for me, the GDD is the alignment document. It's supposed to be that thing that brings your team together, keeps them aligned as development is going. And for me, that's where that one part of the GDD really fails, is to stay a live document, as it is mostly capturing a period in time of a decision to go, or a decision to share this to try and get funding, as it was usually seen as, or executed with, as a pitch to get money, to get permission to start. Nowadays, that's not the role it has, and it's not the way teams need to think about it. So the biggest mistake is taking history and trying to bring it with you when it doesn't fit your team, your culture, your project in the way that you're thinking about it, or what you already know about it. Let's see. If someone remembers only one thing, what should a GDD do for them tomorrow? Align the team. If you're coming up with disagreements about what you're doing, why you're doing it, what's the most important, what is the thing that's tying every detail together, then you've missed the boat. and you need to go back and have a realignment and a come to Jesus moment with your team to make sure that you're all going in the same direction and knowing why you're going in that direction and where that decision came from. This is to help keep things moving. It's not to stop you from failing or stop you from experimenting. It is purely to keep going forward with some grounding, knowing that you believe something, you've talked it over, you've all agreed this is what you're doing, and this is your starting point to go forward. I think, and we'll get into this a little bit more, is the GDD was used to being a stale document by the time it was approved and everyone started going, because as soon as iteration started, as soon as development started, new things were being documented, new conversations were being had, new decisions being made, and you could be deviating away from your truth and you wouldn't necessarily know it. As a side, trying to just play around with AI and see what that's like, I think what you get with that drift from the conversation with AI is exactly what you get with your team, just over a much faster period of time. With AI, you can challenge things and move things and have a conversation, but it's feeding you back information and decisions, and you have to constantly realign it as you go. Otherwise, it's getting farther and farther from your truth, or guiding you down a design or around decisions that it wants. It's emphasizing back at you, and you have to have a clarity of mind, of presence to know, no, this isn't what we're doing. Here's a guardrail, and keep refining that as you go. You have to do the same thing with teams, but it happens over a much longer period of time. All right. That was just the clip generation. We'll get into the show now. Tonight, I want to connect two conversations: why indie games and indie studios matter so much right now, and why small teams still need a disciplined way to decide on what they're actually building. I'm also preparing for my Slice 2026 roundtable discussion about game development documents. So your questions tonight can help sharpen the conversation we take into that room. And I'll have two, I think, 30-minute panels in the afternoon. So I hope to see you there. Anytime you put a question into chat, just let me know what context you're coming at, what your question is, and if I get a lot of questions, I may not get to all of them, but I'm assuming I'll get to all of them because I want to really engage with anyone else who's present. If you're watching through Riverside and Chrome or Edge on a computer, you can request to join the conversation with mic and camera. Accepted callers are recorded and may be included in an edited podcast. If you can put "I consent to recording and podcast reuse" in your request message, that would be really cool of you and helpful for me. Yes, notes. Love a good conversation and presentation. It's been a while since I've done one of these. So, what exactly is Rising and who's benefiting? I think right now, if we separate creation, output, cultural influence, visibility, sales, and sustainable studios, you'll get kind of a mix of who's gaining. I think what we're getting is, now that the industry has collapsed, I mean, we're at like 45,000. Oh, puppy, it's okay. We're at like 45,000 layoffs since I think 2022 or 2023 in around the world in the industry, and I think the vast majority of those have been coming from the United States. So we're in this state as the industry, our North American industry, and probably some of Europe, is trying to figure out where we go from here. We have groups like Embracer and Microsoft and companies themselves going smaller and really looking internally of what they're doing and why they're doing it, whatever projects they've greenlit or still sustaining with a live operation. So with that collapse of what everyone saw as definitive gaming, everything that existed from, I'd say, prior to 2023, we saw that as AAA. You saw some games rising up, like I mentioned, Inner Sloth and Among Us coming up and really being able to go, hey, this is a cool thing. Fall Guys had its moment too. And that started driving this smaller project, but a lot of live operations and constantly getting people to play all the time, one game as much as possible because everyone's competing for your attention. Post 2023, as people started getting laid off and people started having less money for buying so many games or sustaining all the battle passes and memberships and everything, they also grew up. And so people changed and the cultural influence of games is kind of changing. We could talk about World of Warcraft and what that did for gaming in 2004, to date myself, to date that whole movement. And you've always had games like Call of Duty and Madden coming through and selling like hotcakes. And so that was always part of gaming. And you had the more niche games, the role playing games, the MMOs, all coming through and doing their thing as everyone kind of had it. And Game Pass was a relatively new thing as well. And trying to figure out what it was that the audience wanted as it was getting bigger and bigger. And now it's not. It's, I mean, the audience is bigger than ever, but the appetite has kind of hit max capacity. But with everyone's appetites changing, we're getting to a point where people can really be choosy and picky, and not every game is going to sell a million copies. And none of those teams that were structured prior to 2023 were ready for that kind of shift. The companies weren't ready, the projects weren't ready. So, yuck. And now we have more tools than ever that are accessible to everyone. Uh, Unreal even went so far as to make Unreal Engine for Fortnite so that people who really love Fortnite could stay in Fortnite but become part of that creator economy. You got Unreal in general that's been around and free for a long time now, over probably 15 years, 20 years, somewhere in that neighborhood. And Unity has been around for a good long while. Godot is now making its rise. You've got programs like RPG Maker, Game Maker, and uh, I mean other tools that come fully assisted, ready to kit out, make your own experience. And these modding tools that are out there. I mean, I'm seeing old games getting modded, like Garden Warfare 2, and what was the one I just got shown? Uh, yeah, Garden Warfare 2. I'm seeing some just kind of wild stuff that's out there. People are modding Mario games and like hacking them and emulating them and seeing what goes wrong. We're getting all sorts of weird game experiences out of broken experiences that aren't the game themselves. So what qualifies as a game or game content is really being challenged, and it's allowing people to come in and make their own experiences, which is why we're getting friend slop and these walking simulators and job simulators and are we there yet and things like that. We're getting to really challenge the smallest, most minimum experience that's going to make a game for someone. We can talk about distribution as well. Steam, the Epic Game Store, you are get itch.io, you're getting all of these opportunities to put your game up there for free, and they only take a cut. So the Apple Game Store, the Google Game Store, the Android store, on mobile as well. So platforms are accessible. Nintendo is accessible on the Switch. You're getting every platform available to the entire gaming audience, and you can sell it for $1. You can put it up for free with your microtransactions. Roblox, like, you can put your game pretty much anywhere, multiple ways over, and find a path forward for you in a sustainable way, which is the answer to what the other teams and the other projects and the other companies don't have the answer for yet. They will have that answer. They will adapt, but right now they're going through the painful growing pains of figuring that out and seeing that they can't expect to make every game a blockbuster anymore because there's no way to guarantee that. I think a lot of the industry got those expectations and gains was because gaming was still quite kind of a niche until like 2010s. I'd say League of Legends, Overwatch, World of Warcraft started kind of really popularizing it, to me at least. I had been playing games since the early 90s, so uh, for me it's always been there, but I think it reached max popularity or volatility for popularity with World of Warcraft, with Call of Duty, and as you start getting online gameplay and really allowing people to have different experiences again. So using Slice and Seattle Indies as evidence of a local professional infrastructure, it's not proof that it's like this around everywhere, but the fact that Seattle, it's one of the major gaming hubs of North America, but the fact that they can pull together a nonprofit, they can organize an event like Slice and Six, which I'll share those links in the credits and everything, so be able to share that as well. Because we can do those events and I'm participating in it and we're getting people with the professional experience or people who have already made their game. I think the creator of Stardew Valley, he was there last year and he did Stardew Valley mostly solo. He got his group coming and he scaled as far as he needed to make it the game that he wanted to. Now his new game, it's not Chocolate Factory, it's Chocolate something, but like he's got a team and he's really being mindful about how he rolls that out. But he's not, in my mind, he's not indie. Look at the success of Stardew Valley. But we can bring in that knowledge, we can share that knowledge, and really everyone, every gamer out there is so much more educated about what a game is, what a good game feels like, what it is they're looking for, what kind of genre, how hardcore, casual they are. They know what is and isn't in their sphere of enjoyment. And there's options for all of it. We're seeing cozy games go nuts right now. It's a new genre. It's a new way to engage people because they don't want to play multiplayer or don't want to play competitive with other people, but they want to have some soft gameplay, something that's grounding and fun without pressure to keep up with it or pressure to perform in the game. And so we're getting this and we're able to spread this knowledge amongst each other. I've been to several Seattle Indies events where people are talking about making their own engine, making their own lighting engine, making their own retro handheld, and we're getting all sorts of crazy ideas, which is what has been popping off and making people so excited. The Xbox Live Arcade games back in the day with Braid and Splosion Man and Super Meat Boy, those were niche games. Casual Crashers, another fantastic one that still gets played today. Like, you have those types of games that were not stuck on Xbox, but they were founded on Xbox. And portability started coming in, and now players and creators know those style of games can be profitable. So they're making their own iterations. We're seeing a bunch of crazy things. And so, case in point, I spent some time playing Choo Choo Defenders, which I thought was an amazing take on uh, tower defense. So I'm going to share this. I'm going to come back here. Okay, good. Good, good, good. It's looking great. So we'll play that. If it gets too loud, I have it muted, but who knows how it's going to go in case everything decides to do its own thing. So it's playing, should be good. Yeah, I'm just going to let that roll in the background. And this, as far as I know, small team. It came across during the last Next Fest, and I thought it looked intriguing, so I downloaded it and let it play. I had a blast with it. This isn't your typical AAA presentation. This isn't the experience that you would necessarily want for a lot of people who are competitive or looking for that pressure to min max your roguelike experience. Roguelikes and tower defenses are not usually your casual game, but this is no exception. I had a lot of fun with this because it was allowing me to really see how good I could get. And I thought the idea was fantastic. It's creative. I had never thought about a moving tower defense like this before. So creating your routes, making it fun to get that high score still, but you're still a moving tower. So you still have to deal with the mobs. And I only went through a few levels in the beginning areas. So that was kind of nuts for me, but I had more than enough fun with it. I'll be grabbing it shortly for sure. Um, seeing that we have this education and accessibility and proof that players know how to build games. They know what they're saying when they give feedback. You have credible experience, even if no one has actually made a game before. You can figure out an engine. You can figure out those hard skills and that education just with time and effort. The will to do so, the ability to communicate with a team is the hard part for me and for a lot of other people. So the soft skills and staying aligned, which is where for me the GDD comes in. So my thesis is that the rise of indies describes the possibility and participation, but success still has gates. We're looking at the rise of opportunity because anyone can get in, anyone's well informed enough to make the next big thing because they have a fun idea and they can see it done without tremendous effort or time commitments to making it happen. Opportunity, we can look at genres that are very specific and audiences that are underserved. And so I'll take this perspective. If we think about auto battlers, I think auto battlers they've been made inaccessible because the first ones came out and they were competitive by nature. They were player versus player, they were complex, they required spreadsheets and required you to know a bunch of mechanics very quickly. Not very accessible, but they were kind of fun. And now, another game that I found on NextFest was, now I'm blanking the name, Guild Run. I want to say Guild Wars because old habits die hard, but Guild Run is a PvE auto battler right now, at least with its demo, and it is the most complete demo, the most complete game I've ever played in a demo. For what it is, as self-contained as it is an amazing PvE auto battler experience with roguelike elements. It is phenomenal. Like it's still challenging me to this day, and my Steam account says I have 200 hours in, but I don't have that much because I've left it running because I didn't want to turn it off, and I just left it running all night. So smaller feedback loops, closer to the creator and player communities, as well as these indies are reaching out to their community much faster than AAA games are, much faster than large corporations are, because there's this presence of we can't have leaks. You're seeing it with GTA 6. You're seeing it with a bunch of other things that have come out, always come out whenever a game is hyped, that someone finds something. The Pokemon games coming out have already had leaks. I mean, back in the day, Guild Wars 2 had leaks, and there was all these consequences or perceived consequences for it, but really it didn't change things at the end of the day. People were still excited about the event and the announcement that was still coming, and when it came out, it was a big deal, and the community still loved it. These indies are not afraid of that. They're going to events, they're sharing their games when it's still wireframes, they're still sharing their concept game, they're still showing their primitive art and everything, and they're not saying that this is what the game is, it's what the game is right now. So they're fearless and they're cultivating feedback all the time. New studios and cross collaboration. I mean, if you listen to the last episode that I did for the Summoning Hour, I talked to the guys from Galama. Got it, guys. It's such a hard time saying that. They're doing it kind of like in between things as they have time. Just the two of them moving through ideas and making it happen. There's less pressure. There's no overtime. They stick to a schedule that they want. They talk to each other and they have it covered. When they didn't have a particular skill set, they worked with each other. They made it happen. They figured out who had space, who was interested, and they kind of muddled through some other things like the narrative and figuring out what the writing was. But that's the opportunity that's there. They get to figure it out. You're not waiting for a specialist to be hired. You're not having to search for that person, find that person that's going to match your culture. You already have the people who are close to the project. They're already onboarded and they're willing to say, I'm willing to try. I'm willing to grow into this. I'm willing to take that role. I've seen that happen at studios in the middle of production or pre-production, and that's fine. That happens. It's an opportunity of a flexible team, and when they really know what the capacity is, what the opportunity and the risks are, indies, they just get to go. They're much more agile. They're much faster to make decisions and go, oops, that was a mistake. Toss it, try again. It's not catastrophic for a lot of them. Oh, I got my, huh, I didn't think that was working. Thanks, TwitchBot. So new studios form or indie studios form, small teams from 1 to 20 basically, and they get to mix and match. They get to go as fast as they can, and if someone's interested, they go. It's really cool, and it's really amazing to see that you can get games that are made in 6 months' time, a year's time. And I mentioned Run and Gun's GDD. On the very last page of the 11th page, they're like, start date, June, it was like April 4th, 1995. Completion, July 14th, 1996. Run and Gun, not even named GTA or Grand Theft Auto or anything like that. That was the pitch and the complete idea that they needed to go. Your small team being able to go like that is going to get a far more complete game than than a few hundred people staring at a few hundred-page document. There's just too much information there, and not everyone was onboarded to that information. So there's this indoctrination opportunity that comes with smaller teams. Pressure, discoverability, and pre-release audience building. There's no pressure. These indie teams go at the pace that they want. They're going at a sustainable level that allows them to correct things that they really feel passionate about. I do believe as a producer, there's probably some decisions that are more emotionally based, or like they feel like that they need to improve it when really it's probably fine for those who are inexperienced. But anyone who's made a game before, they've already learned the lesson of what's too much, what's too big, what are they holding on to because they just like it, not because it's what they need. Those instincts grow, and a lot of these indies or a lot of these individual developers, they've gone through game jams, they've been with different teams, they've gotten to learn a whole bunch of lessons along the way, so they're coming together as more of a whole individual, a whole contributing team member than many other individuals who got their start in AAA or who graduated through QA like I did. I look at some of these students coming through DigiPen and the projects that they're making and the teams that they created and put a game up on Steam, and they're still working together as some of them are post graduation now at this point. They're still working together. Like, that is such a wild opportunity and a wild experience that isn't anything that I got. And that's so cool that they get this. And it means that so many more people are doing that. If DigiPen students are doing that, you know that there's the passionate after school game club in high school, maybe even middle school at this point, where kids are learning programming and they're taking it to the next level because they're so involved with it. Funding, all these teams are usually self-funded or doing it moonlighting, so they work a separate job, they come back, and they get things done as they can. Scope, usually scope is probably the hardest thing I would imagine for a small inexperienced team, is that they're going to want to blow up their game bigger, 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 because they still have this idea of what's out there, what they experienced, and they're thinking that they're competing with that, which isn't wrong, but as their initial game, as their funding is small, where they didn't get the specialist, where they're learning more, putting that emphasis on the learning and just shipping something is far more valuable than trying to get it perfect. So I think that there is a little bit of that pressure, but that's also manageable. And for all I know, they've already learned that lesson too, because they've heard it 100 times from every GDC conversation, from every roundtable conversation, from every schmuck who's running a podcast. Because this information is out there, it's been archived, it's being worked to be preserved, and it's being talked about. So it's accessible, and people don't need to be forking over thousands of dollars to get this information. By the way, I hope you're really liking Choo Choo Defenders, because it gets kind of crazy, but it's funny at the same time. Like, I love a flamethrower train. I think that's great. It's one of those creative ideas that no one's going to follow through. Like Carl, I still expect dual shields in Guild Wars 2, maybe Guild Wars 3 at this point. So I'm still waiting. Still waiting. Yeah, and I mentioned Godot and Unity and Unreal and so many other tools that make it available for people to find the tool that works best for them. They are going to be able to make a game that feels accessible. Like, I've been building in Godot lately. It felt way better to open that up and play with what was there than I ever felt comfortable in Unity or Unreal Engine for Fortnite, which is a somewhat scaled down version of Unreal, I think, and that was still years ago, so it's definitely changed since then. But I think that the accessibility to tools and the education behind those tools and the communities behind those tools make it exceptionally viable to be able to do your own thing. And I hope more of you do. I would love to talk about your project. So if there's anything you got going on, would love to hear about it. Now I'm going to switch over to the GDD conversation. In my experience, the old pattern was approval, production, and drift. The GDD unlocked development, confluence and discipline, libraries expanded, but original alignment documents stayed at its earliest phase, and the build learned more than the build in the game revealed more truth about what the game was than what the GDD was supposed to keep it tied close to. Of course, you're going to adapt, and it's going to be one of those things that you have to learn from it, and you're not going to know everything that you wanted to know up front. But that's kind of the opportunity that comes with game design. Sorry, something on my screen. I'm just going to read my notes now. So originally, developers built trust through experience, and they would use that to pitch things to a publisher, and they would have presentations or this GDD document already prepared and to some degree of with confidence, and they use their experience to sell that ask for money and that permission to go. And it carried more with that initial ignition for starting a team and a project. That is not where we're at now. The GDD builds evidence. The document itself probably isn't the impetus to get that funding anymore. I'm just going to say that this is more the team document than what's going to get you funded. I think team experience counts. I think shipped projects definitely counts, especially when you have the analytics to support, hey, we build good things or popular things, not necessarily good things, but popular things. And when you can show that you can work to completion, when you can work to shipping, you're getting that out ahead of you and presenting yourself in a professional way, basically. Now, you get the evidence, you get the feature materials, you get to have the language and the conversation about your game and sell the idea. But if the GDD isn't that same promise that publishers and your financiers are looking for, it's because the demo is. So bootstrapping a demo, getting a working prototype, it doesn't have to be beautiful, though art goes a long way to sell the vision for your game. The way you present it matters most. If you say, hey, here's the game idea, here's how it plays, here's the idea for the art, we're just merging ourselves there. We're getting there. That's part of that salesmanship that comes from marketing and being able to sell your team, your project. Salesmanship is unfortunately one of those realities that a lot of people aren't comfortable with. And when they think making a game, they think working only on the game. They're not thinking about the whole sausage as it needs to be made. And like I said earlier, players are bringing inherent legitimacy and understanding to games. So there's less that you have to sell them on. If it's a genre that's known, if it's a mechanic that's known, double jumping. You don't have to explain double jumping anymore. You probably don't even have to really explain drifting in a racing game anymore because of Mario Kart. Really, some of those things just become inherited language and inherited understanding from one genre to another. And you can't talk to all the publishers as the same audience. You're going to have a very different conversation from Devolver to EA or Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo. You're going to get very different audiences. You're going to get different questions. In my experience, even with greenlight meetings, even after you've gotten that initial funding, you go to a greenlight, you might have Sam from accounting pulled in and be like, hey, what do you think of this? And you have to deal with that. Heard some stories like that. So you have to be ready for your game to speak to more than just the audience you intended, because you have to be testing that. You have to come with receipts and data to back up your game. Tencent, they operate a lot on prove to us that your game is going in the right direction with analytics, with player feedback, with UX studies, with making sure your game is on track to be a success. No hidden costs, no hidden flubs, no hidden monsters of schedule reworking and refiguring out and giant budget costs. The GDD still matters, absolutely, but its job is not to pretend the whole future is known. Its job is to preserve the original alignment while building teaches the team what must change. So you know what you want and you know what you know, but any experienced designer, artist, developer, programmer, anyone is going to know you only know what you know. And when you go and you try something, it's not always going to work 100% of the time, or it's not going to work the way you want it to, or it's not going to work with that other thing that was being made. So you have to figure out how to bridge it. And sometimes that means you go back 60%, 80%, all the way and start over again to make it work that way. So because the GDD matters, for me, I keep speaking of this alignment, and that makes it more of this active conversation. That makes it more of a living constitution. It may be one page, it could be 100 pages, or a focused authority connected to a library. Length is not the standard. The contents aren't even the standard either. Some GDDs will contain some of the technical information and requirements. Some will have features or like a full breakdown of every puzzle in the game. It's up to what's important to the team, and what they can communicate, from my perspective, is a non-negotiable. At the bare minimum, it is a list of non-negotiables of what the game is and what the game isn't. If you know those guardrails, is and isn't, and everything in between, it allows you to figure it out per category, per discipline, per feature, you will be just fine. But I think that there is some things that need to be aligned and maintained, and that's the whole darn document. That if the game is coming out of this one document, it needs to be an authority and a source for everyone to check back with. You heard early in Amazon's customer service. Anybody could ask the question in a meeting, how does this help the customer? How does this benefit the customer? And it was like an all-stop nuclear red button to a meeting, to a decision, to a feature, to a product, everything. It used to be that way. I don't know if it's still that way now. But with that, the team was aligned on the customer first. With the GDD, you're aligning your team to the original idea. Is this still important? Are these non-negotiables what you still believe them to be? Or do you need to rework it? Do you need to update it? But if you don't track that decision, if you don't track where you came from to where you want to go or where you're going, how far are you going to deviate? And what is that introducing? A lot of risk to the schedule, to your budget, to the original promise, to the team that you brought in, because you might have brought in people who were excited about that first part and not that second part. So the document needs to be continually updated. We have versioning software like Perforce and GitHub and everything. Start with that version 0.0001 GDD of what you know. Build from it, understand it. And once you get everything that you know and you figured out what you don't know in the same context of the expectations and intentions that you have of categories and content and features and marketability and user experience and all this kind of stuff, whatever your team knows you need to consider is what should go into your GDD, because you're not just working on a game. I'm going to say that the GDD is not just about working on just the game. It is a reflection and an inclusion of your team's culture and the values that your company is representing. Your company has pillars. Your project has pillars. Your team has culture and cultural pillars. You have to be able to make those all match to get going so that you can have the real conversations and understand how you are coming to these decisions. Any new authorities need to be linked, owned, discoverable to the rest of the library, and prevented from silently competing with the GDD. If you've ever worked in an office building, you know how many water cooler conversations happen that don't get back to other people, and people go, when did we decide this? That's the problem of having a static GDD and not being able to communicate or have that communication plan. Little side tangent, I learned more about traditional project management when I went and got my PMP, and some of the problems that are in games, especially now that games are no longer niche and they are quite mainstream, that I think traditional project management is actually going to be more and more important to game development, because you know what you want, you know what it takes, you have comparable examples and competitors that you can say this but not this and this but not this, and you can build something else that's entirely different using examples from everyone else. And it gets to be something that's well known. You understand what it takes to build those things and how quickly you can get there. It is much more like traditional project management now than it used to be, where everyone was pushing agile this, agile that, because you wanted to be able to activate and act on all the iterations and the feedback that you got. I think that's still possible, even within taking in some of those traditional project management. That's why there's hybrid project management. Anyways, that's enough of that. When building teaches something new, you update the constitution. If you knew that there was something missing, you update the missing section to the context and the level of acceptance that can be approved of and maintained and indoctrined into the document, so that then anyone else who comes along, they could follow chronologically all the changes, or they just see the latest and they go, okay, I see how all this relates. It is a communications plan. It is a source of truth. That's not Jira, which you'll get a bunch of people thinking Jira should be your source of truth. It is your source of truth about the status of where your project is at the most granular level. The GDD is the source of truth on what your game is supposed to be. It's fulfilled and unfulfilled promises of what you expect. And so I kind of have this acronym called PLAY that is a tool, and it's not an industry standard or anything. Or a universal template. This is just a quick and dirty way to think about your team, your GDD. Promise, play, promise. One sentence, target player and context, intended feeling, and 3 pillars. 3 things that make your game, whatever else that comes from it, it has to be underneath one of these 3 things. 3 values that can contextually tell your game what is most important to about it. If it's inclusion, accessibility, if it's customization, if it's FPS action shooting, if it's third person shooting, if it's exceptional cameras, if it's replays or anything like that, streamability. You get it. Three main pillars: your limits, time, team, budget, platform constraints, non-goals, what your game isn't, minimum shippable experience, knowing where to stop, when to stop, where you're stepping too far or where it's not far enough even. Actions. What's your core loop? What are your hypotheses about each category, about each feature, about each discipline, each value, each pillar? What are your risks that you know? These are just things that you know that you don't know, or things that could happen that you're worried about. I think a lot of people will put together a microtransactions plan and they'll say, yeah, we could do this monthly. But they're not thinking about the fatigue that comes from microtransactions and having a battle pass. They're not thinking about the fatigue of surprise sale or the random shops or time limits. They're not thinking about what that does to a player's mentality and the enjoyment that they have in case they miss something, or in case they just spent their last dollar and they can't get that next thing that comes out because they didn't understand the schedule of your game releases and everything, which does happen. What your next prototype or player test is. So when do you initiate a player test? When do you start that new prototype of a new feature? What is your acceptance schedule? What is the scope that your team can take on? And when do you choose to move on? What is that approval process? How are you going to communicate and how are you going to align? I think some of that comes in to understanding the risk of your team and the culture and helping to communicate that to anyone who joins the team. If you have a separate communication plan, that's great. That totally works, and that is another way of doing it. I think for a GDD, that when you come in and you have this expansive idea already and you kind of know the direction that you're going and the game is growing, when you're thinking about the person you hire 6 months to 6 years after you started, you want them to come in and feel like they're a part of it and included from the beginning. So you have to have information that's up to date, not going, where's this over here? Where's this over there? Talk to 30 different owners to figure out what's the important stuff. The important stuff is in the GDD. It has the latest decisions. It has the latest breakdowns of here's the core game and here's the DLC. Maybe you have a separate GDD for the DLC and post-launch content. Maybe you keep it all together again so that there's this living constitution and nothing gets stale. Why? Yardstick, evidence, decision owners, review dates, links, change logs, communication plans. People will get on me about RACI charts and being like, when you need one, when you don't need one, and when it's a good idea, when it's a bad idea. But change logs, communication plans, and lists of owners are helpful. If you can name names of accountability and responsibility and who needs to be communicated to, it helps, especially at the beginning, because then you can see as things change, you know what that person owns and how they own it. It's not easy to maintain. It isn't. Especially all the links and people names as they're coming and going through hirings and quittings and paternity and maternity leaves and all that stuff. It does get a little bogged down. As an example, I've been working on my own game. I'm calling it tentatively Cruisers. I started from scratch and I was just like, I know what I want. We're going to take this format and we're going to build something from it. And so as of July 27th, I got to version 0.3 and it was approved as a current working title level authority. It remains formally at a concise design draft because I know that there is far more that I don't know that I can't account for. I don't know anything. Well, as a gamer, I know about sound design. I don't know how I'm going to implement it. I don't know how to communicate that kind of stuff, or even networking if I do any online components, and how to break that down. So I'm working through what I do know. And as I'm figuring out, oh, I hadn't thought about this, we're bringing it in. We're bringing in little chunks and adding it on. That's all part of my process. And I'll happily go into that and that whole process. That's been fascinating to work with AI on. Just to put it out there, my approach is to prototype and play with AI, but to get people to help build the final product, because ultimately I want that curation and that human touch on everything. That's a personal priority for me. That's in my GDD about how this is going to go. We're prototyping. Anything that it gets approved through a certain point will then get the human touch. And hopefully we'll have designed it, built it enough to go, that's understandable. This is the breakdown. This is how we're going to do this. But let's see. So this is a concise design draft of my GDD. It was finalized as a concise working design authority, but it is a downstream authority finalized with intentionally left unfinished sections. That's all it means. Is like, I knew what I knew and I know what I don't know, some of it at least, and I'm leaving room for the things that I don't know. But it is as much detail, I'm putting in as much detail as I know, because I'm using it to inform other parts and making sure that all of my decisions are documented. And that way the whole process is going to get updated as I go along, where there are decisions, where there are learnings, so that I can follow the history of it and even use that to retrospect my processes. This is why I think the GDD is incredibly important. My rallying invariant, one of my inflexibles, is becoming more yourself rather than becoming the best. This isn't a competitive game. This isn't even necessarily a multiplayer game, but there is a sense of cooperative play to it. So that is one of my pillars. Becoming yourself is more important than competing. I have 3 interlocking loops. There's immediate movement, your run, as it were, and then a long horizon progression that helps inform each of those previous steps as you go. I have 10 experience beats that connect welcoming, curiosity, permission to stop, and possibility to create, to concrete design causes. So I'm looking at experiences and I'm looking at moment to moment to then expand on some of the other ideas that I have. The 10 sections move from pitch and player test through journey and gameplay and lore, identity, features, and final design boundaries. Part of what I've experienced in game development is that not everyone gets an opportunity to weigh in on different features, on different ideas, or how they would want to execute on it. I think VFX and audio and QA obviously get left out until the very end, or there's a decision that changes their context. Not everyone knows what's downstream of them. So for me in this project, because I have the availability and the flexibility, I can put on different hats and context of what I know as a producer. I've worked with all those departments before and say this, not that, this, not that, and put in guardrails for each discipline that helps me curate a blue ocean perspective of every feature, as if every one of them were the original founder of a feature, and then smush it all together to find out what that actually looks like and see where I agree and disagree with what that idea looks like. And this helps me create the most comprehensive GDD I've ever seen, as well. That's incomplete at this point, but still has a foundation of where game development has come from. The idea is diverge, converge, and then govern. I like governing factors and making sure that the way things are done is controlled, because I mean, that's what I've taken from my professional experience as a producer. When things are in order, when teams are aligned, we get to expand more. We get to play more. People get more of what they were hoping to build than just the minimum, just not just the get it out and ship it mentality. This is the opportunity to build and make space and time for what you truly want to build. So my version 0.2 captured broadly across disciplines, possibilities, guidance, validation, and unresolved questions. Version 3 stitched together all of those relationships, distilled it down to a bare minimum executable, and then utilized the language to bring it all together, start creating a glossary even, so that I'm keeping my own language, and so anyone who comes in, they know the language that's being spoken, or can learn it over time. The language of a team, the culture of a team, is part of that onboarding experience, and to make it as easy as possible, tracking your decisions makes it really possible to make it easy and inclusive. There's no universal shapes. I mentioned Monaco, Deus Ex, and Grim Fandango. I'll put links for those GDDs in the description after the show, and I'll be sharing those on social media, and then when I chop up this for an episode, you'll get the descriptions in the discussion. But like Monaco, it was compact and pitched like it discussed concepts, mechanics, progression, flow, and content categories that were very quickly legible. I mean, this thing was maybe 11 pages, or I think this one was closer to 30. 11 was run and gun. Deus Ex was huge. It was close to an evolving documentation, because they were adjusting it as they went, and they expanded and they expanded, and there was a bunch of features in there that didn't make it to the final version that ended up getting cut. I think that's just a huge voice to how creative and aware that team was of what they wanted to make, how big they wanted this game to be. And if you played it back then, it felt incredible. The original Deus Ex deserves a remaster, just putting it out there. Grim Fandango, that one illustrates like every puzzle, and it shows characters and all the structure that they used, and it's Grim Fandango, and what's in that document is what you got. It was really impressive, but it's different lengths, it's different styles, it's different storyboarding, it's different concept, if art was even included in them. So whether you have to make it legible, or you make it an understandable experience, or you show how deep you can go. And I think the more elaborate you go, the more pages you have, doesn't mean you have a better game. It just means that there's going to be room to cut. If you can really communicate the idea of your game quickly and succinctly, you have to make sure that that's fun and pure and replayable. And you understand what's going to make that really true. And you see the mechanics, and you're able to communicate that and prove that with playtesting. Deus Ex, a game of that scope, you're going to have to really rely on the systems and the storytelling to feed you all the way through, and why certain things are important. And I'm not trying to make everyone use a single template. I want to learn from each team's design and design constitution, and how to govern that, how to work with that culture and team. That is why I said it with one of my old previous podcasts. This is the most collaborative team sport that's out there. You have so many cooks in the kitchen with ideas for other people in other disciplines, but you're still supposed to trust each other, because you were all hired to accomplish this goal. And you're all ultimately working towards the same goal. So Why does the GDD get stale? Why do we let that get stale? There are tools, there's methods, there are communication patterns that can help you get there. It is absolutely necessary for a team to do these alignment exercises, and others will do that. Retrospectives are supposed to be that. Those milestone reviews are supposed to be that. The sprint reviews, all of those things are supposed to be alignment tools. But we all know how they either don't happen, get interrupted, something else goes sideways with the project. And so those things aren't, those governing processes and documents aren't considered as important as the problem we're staring at. But I think this is where not just a source of truth problem is revealed, but a, how do I want to say this? It is a priority and a discipline problem to stick to what works and what has been serving the team and understanding what's been serving the team as opposed to reacting to a problem. I used to watch a cake making show. I think it was not Cake Boss. It was either Ace of Cakes or Cake Boss, but it was the idea that things are going to go wrong, and the sign of a professional is how you handle them. If you're going to be a professional game developer, if you're going to be an indie game developer and making games, how you handle when your project's not behaving or when your community's not behaving or when some service goes down and your game's not playable, how you handle that is going to be what makes you a professional more so than the right process, the right time, and reacting to every little thing. But I think having a GDD and a governing system or a document that at least gets people into the creative governing of your game is going to be the most important thing that keeps your team aligned, that helps everyone understand the spirit of what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. And it keeps people invested without losing interest, without losing engagement from people who were there for a game that they thought they were excited about. Hmm. Let's see. Hmm. Simple questions, just to wrap things up for a few minutes. What review cadence keeps the authority alive without creating clerical work? That's up to your team. That's up to the scope of your project. That is up to how you want to manage it. If you see your alignment fading, if you're seeing more conflicts that aren't productive happening, it's time to go back and take that step back from forcing yourself to push forward and answer the questions about what's not working for your team. I think that ownership of being a leader or a senior in a team comes with you're going to be a step removed from the game. You're going to be reviewing, not making. You're going to be helping others make, and you're going to help answer things so that others make, you communicate, you guide, you execute through other people. Just because you're good at your discipline doesn't mean you're a good manager or a good leader. And so understanding yourself is going to be a big, important step to that. Finding the right cadence depends on the scope, the project, your culture, your role, what the team's expectations are. And you have to have that conversation first. Clerical work is a part of leadership. It is a part of getting that experience. Sure, it might be delegated to you, but you have to make sure it gets done. And the person, if it gets delegated down to someone else, that person who gave it to you or gave it to your teammate, they're ultimately still accountable and they're responsible. They're sharing who's responsible, pushing it down, but they're still accountable because they're the leader. They're the person who is in charge of that decision or that execution. So you're all in the same boat, and figuring out what that reaction looks like is up to the team. Let's see. What does a publisher need beyond a GDD? A demo, vertical slice, presentation, curated presentations. If you're doing resumes out there, you're not sending the same resume out for every game. Oh, I just realized the video's done. That's probably good. That was Choo Choo Defenders. Love it. Going to be playing it more. Excited to see others play it as well. GDD, or what do publishers need beyond a GDD? Curated presentations, curated art. If you're making a tank game, I don't think you're going to go to the Pokemon Company. Make sure you're aligned with your audience. If you're going to EA, give them the marketing, the full structure plan, how it's going to work top to bottom, the authoritative look of you own this, this is yours, top to bottom. The more elaborate, more complete that you can make it, the better for the audience. Microsoft, risk adverse. Think about what is risky, what is not. If you're going to try and sell a multiplayer competitive game, team-based, role-based shooter, there's a crowded audience there. You're probably not going to get through there if you're, especially with the budget that typically goes with a project that size. So consider that. Consider if you're a small team, if your scope is small, find a smaller publisher or do it yourself. The Steamworks and that back end, AWS, you get a whole bunch of support to get your game to go through that process. I know, don't skewer me. Everyone's got problems with all these tools and horror stories and everything. So it's going to be a learning curve one way or another, but you can get through that process as long as you're choosing the right one that's for you. Steam, probably one of the most accessible. Itch.io, also a great way to get your game out there. What belongs in the title, GDD, and what belongs in a linked authority? Again, that kind of comes down to what you know in the moment and what you're still deciding. If you're figuring out whether or not something is canon for your game, probably keep it off to the side until it's approved and then embedded when the team has agreed and it's part of the plan from there on, because then you can also have that design, the decision register, making sure it knows that that's what happened, and you have this great chronological order, and you can dive into the process between each layer of each decision and see that the process was upheld. I'm a producer. I love process. I love making processes work for teams and building the process around what teams expect and desire to help them be creative and accountable. So that's where I'm coming from with all of this, is that I think that there is a way to align the team. If people followed my process, 5 different teams, they would still end up with 5 very different GDDs, especially after a year of development, a year post-launch. It's going to be different because different teams, different cultures, different priorities, different pillars, different games. And the more elements of difference that you get, the farther you're going to deviate from an idea of a template. And this is just an idea. So it's trying to figure out what everything, how everything aligns. So let's see. Yeah. I think that's where we'll wrap up. I answered a bunch of questions. I prattled a little bit, but I'll get this edited and it'll be a new podcast episode. But anyone who stopped in to hear me chat, I appreciate that. Hopefully you enjoyed the Choo Choo Defenders gameplay. I'll add that into a link and make sure others see it. Thanks for your time. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone at Slice or at 6. Both of those are in early September. Look for the Seattle Indies link and the calendar links to those events in social media and on the podcast episode. This will count as the Tuesday release. Normally it's at 4:30 a.m. on Pacific time on Tuesdays. This one is kind of a special episode, so trying to do a couple different things here. So we'll see how it goes. And let me know what you think about the live stream format if you popped in. Thanks so much, and I will catch you all later. The discussion doesn't end here. It starts here in the podcast, and it keeps going on the Discord. So make sure you check out my link tree, contact information, and join in on the Discord conversation.